Welcome, everyone. Hello to Global Voices with Moishe House. We're very excited to see all the faces on the screen today. One of the very unique and exciting things about Moishe House is that it is so global. We have houses and programs in almost 30 countries around the world. So getting to hear what's happening locally, both in terms of young Jewish leaders, the Jewish community, and just local governments, what's happening here. Today is, I think, particularly special as well because we'll hear from residents from Moishe House who also are involved in working with some of our partner organizations, JDC, AJC, and also about a really, truly global initiative that's happening for Shavuot that you can actually join and participate in, but we'll get to hear about it from one of its creators later on. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Moishe House, we are all about inspiring Jewish homes around the world. We engage normally more than 70,000 young adults through 12,000 programs, and those have all traditionally been in person. And the pivots and work to go to virtual has been actually quite exciting to see and to watch, and the numbers have been strong and actually grown. We opened 2 more Moishe houses this month, in fact, and we got over 50 applications last month. So the need and excitement for young adult Jewish life is here. Expedition 9, part of Camp 9 and I, is in its final throes. Now's the time to get your picture for the challenge, and in fact we'll have the grand finale this weekend at noon Eastern. If you'd like to join, please ping us. It'll be an hour. We'll be doing paper plate awards, grand prizes, second place, third place prizes. We'll have some celebrity guests, and it should be a lot of fun as Expedition 9, the 4-week program, comes to an end with over 300 teams and over 4,000 different challenge submissions. And for today, I also want to mention, last week we heard from Moishe House Jerusalem, and I'm pleased to say that they were actually able to have their first in-person programming, obviously with all the social distancing rules and regulations, unlike the pictures you can see of the beaches in Tel Aviv after a hot weekend. But they're really excited to be able to see their community again in person. And it's my pleasure to introduce Tamar Rems. Tamar is going to be our host today. She's a vice chair of Moishe House. She's works and leads with the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. She has a truly global perspective. When coronavirus is not happening, she is constantly around the world supporting PJ Library and other Grinspoon initiatives. Lives in New York, but coming to us live from Greenwich, Connecticut. Turn it over to you, Tamar.
Thanks, David, and hi, everyone. I'll say that the person who not only gives me a run for my money, but beats me every year in travel is David Siegelman. But that said, I'm catching up and hopefully back on the road soon. So as David said, I'm really proud to be on the board of Moishe House and to serve as a vice chair, as well as to co-chair International. So this call is very close to my heart. And as David mentioned, with the Grinspoon Foundation, and many of you probably know the program PJ Library, I've had the honor and really the joy of exploring Jewish communities all around the world. And so as I started to see Moishe House more and more active in all of these places, it really drew me into seeing how a program could be so global and yet at the same time so local, which is, I know, what we'll hear from Tanya, from Jonas, and from Simona today about how it's at once very much a shared experience and yet very deeply different in each place. It's a joy to do this work, and to anyone who wants to talk more about getting involved and being part of the global Jewish community, it's my honor and pleasure. So thank you, David. So I want to introduce today's panelists, or the conversation we're going to have with Jonas, Tanya, and Simona, and then I'll lead into conversation. So first, Jonas, who's from Moishe House, Brussels. Hi, Jonas.
Hi.
I understand you were born and raised in Geneva. You currently work for the EU Office of AJC, the American Jewish Committee, where you focus on EU Parliament outreach and communications. As David mentioned, partners like AJC and the Joint Distribution Committee, JDC, are very critical to all of our work, so thank you. Moishe House Brussels really reflects diversity of the city and the residents, which I know we'll hear about, and community members all around the world. I understand you're foodies and your Shabbat dinners are well known for your food and days spent preparing. Next is Tanya from Moishe House Kharkiv. Great to see you.
Hi.
I understand you're a co-founder of the house.
Yes.
Tanya was born and raised in Poltava, Ukraine, about 2 hours from where you are now. And Ukraine's a very sizable Jewish community. We could probably debate all day the actual numbers depending on who you ask. But Kharkiv's population is somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000. Tanya works for the local JDC office, the Joint Distribution Committee, focused on community development and Jewish renewal, so Jewish life in Kharkiv. It's great to have you. And Simona from Moishe House Boston in Cambridge, my hometown, or where I grew up. It's a pleasure to have you back, Simona. Simona is a resident of Moishe House Boston in Cambridge and is also on the leadership team for Moishe House's Global Shavuot Initiative, which David mentioned last week, something that's being completely led and virtually by our community builders. And in addition to hosting 7 virtual programs a month, she's working on this 25-hour plus virtual learning program with 20 Moishe Houses involved already in more to come. So welcome, everybody. And let's get started in a conversation. So Jonas, I'm going to start with you. I had the pleasure actually of visiting Brussels less than 2 years ago with Moishe House's On the Road trip, which if any of you listening don't know, we've started yearly trips to show friends and supporters the work of Moishe House, as well as to really experience global Jewish community, and it was really amazing. Some people refer to Brussels as the least Belgian city because it's filled with expats. So I'm curious to get a better sense from you what the community looks like.
Yeah, I think it's very true to say that Brussels is the least Belgian city. Actually, most people here, when they move to Brussels, it's actually for either a job or, to live with their partners who have professional opportunities because of the EU institutions, because of headquarters of companies. So it's really, a small bubble because it's still Brussels, a small European city, but at the same time, it's still very much diverse and plenty of nationalities in the city. And I think that's what makes Moishe House Brussels a bit special because we are very, a warm and inviting place for people in our community. Because expats, sometimes they only tend to stay together, they will stay with other fellows of the same nationality. But in Moishe House Brussels, we have people speaking Spanish, English, Flemish, French, and even sometimes Yiddish. And I think that's that's a very nice touch of the house. And then it's still, a Belgian house. But what is also interesting to note is that inside the Belgian Jewish community, you've got still some division. I mean, some differences between the French and the Flemish speaking Belgians. The Flemish tend to be more orthodox, and the French Belgian Jews are less maybe observant. So Moishe House Brussels is really, at the crossroads of all these communities, the expats, the French-speaking Belgians, the Flemish-speaking Belgians. And I think it's a bit of a melting pot. And one example, one very nice memory and experience is having last year, we had 2 separate members, one of a French-speaking Belgian, another one Flemish-speaking Belgian, and they knew each other, but they grew up in opposite communities, and they met again in our house. And I think that was very, making connections with old friendships and making bridges between communities. I think that's what we are good at it in Brussels.
That's fascinating. And I guess I need to brush up on my languages before I come visit your house, but it is really a testament to how much we are global people. So I'm curious, why did you want to be a resident in the first place? And also, slightly different question, how is Moishe House Brussels handling the quarantine?
So when it comes to the first question, you see, I was born and raised in Geneva, like you said, and it's a fairly, small community. And in my mind, I always saw, Judaism led by people, more in their, 50s, activities were focusing either on families or on very young kids. And there was this gap for young adults like me. And yeah, I thought, and it's very true that Moshe House is really the opportunity for young adults to really take Judaism into their own hands and really personalize it. It's one thing to think about it, how to express your Judaism, but to have the space and the opportunities to construct it, that's completely different. And that's what Moshe House is offering. And I think it really has the potential. I mean, we definitely have the potential to really keep basically the fire burning of Judaism and being able to really put our efforts into keeping Judaism very dynamic. When it comes to COVID-19 time, I think it's very interesting to be a resident at this time. One thing about Brussels is because of our community members, most of them are expats, they don't necessarily have a family close by. And that's where, they can feel a bit lonely being in a city where they are, sometimes hundreds of kilometers, thousands of kilometers away from their families, from their hometown. So that's a bit challenging for them. But, we've been checking on them proactively, which really wasn't something that we did before all this, because, most of the time we connect during programs and events at the house, not all the time outside of events. And so, yeah, this was the opportunity to really check on them and to text them, to call them, to know if everything is okay, if they need anything. And, I don't want to say that I'm a Jewish mother because, it's the wrong gender, but I'm a bit of a Jewish dad. And so, yeah, it was really, it's important to check on them. Some are students, have they passed their exams, some just started new jobs. And even, unfortunately, 2 of our community members were affected by COVID-19. They both recovered fully, but, it was during Passover. And so it was a bit hard for one of these community members to observe the rules. And so we brought her a chocolate cake without chametz. So to help her observe the rules. And I think it was, she really liked it. So I think we were basically stepping up and not replacing the families, but, being a support for them, for our community members.
Thank you. That's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the power of person-to-person connection at this time is incredible, and it's great to hear. And lastly, I'll say, just ask you, thinking about just Brussels a bit more broadly in terms of what's happened with coronavirus. We're seeing that Belgium's starting to open some schools and museums this week, but then also it's been a tough crisis with some relatively high cases and death numbers. I'm curious just your reflections generally on how Belgium's handling the crisis.
Yes, so to be honest, at the beginning it was a bit scary because numbers were very high, and compared to countries with similar, sizes and populations, cases in Belgium were, surprisingly very high. And I think it was because, Belgium is between major European countries, Germany, France, UK. The borders are very dynamic. The airport, the traffic is very, significant. And so it was scary because cases were very high. But restrictions are being lifted 1 week at a time. And salons just reopened yesterday. So that's something that we are all very much looking forward to. And shops as well. So, we are all optimistic, which, it's a good thing because when it comes to Moshe House, we will be hopefully able to plan in-person programming very soon. Not right now, but as soon as possible, we will do it because there is a high demand. And that's for sure coming from our Moshe House community members.
Great. And lastly, I'll ask I hear you're foodies, and it sounds like you've been doing some great things with Corona. Is there during Corona time, are there any virtual experiences that you want to share with us?
Sure. So it was, programming during Corona time was a bit challenging. And we had this idea to start doing videos, not on, first about Judaism in general, some tradition, some notions and ideas and concepts about Judaism, but also about Jewish food. I'm very bad at learning Judaism with books. I mean, I've always been bad with text studies. Even if I led some text study sessions, it's not my thing. But my thing is Judaism, learning about Judaism without books. So we made some videos about Jewish food. We shared them. People liked them very much. They shared the videos as well. They sent us pictures of the recipes, telling them, hi, I just did the recipe with my family. Everyone loved it. And, this kind of feedback is really, that's really nice and a nice touch to hear.
Wonderful. Well, I'm definitely going to look up your food videos and recipes. I'll say my feed has never been more full of challah, so it's pretty interesting to see how much food is an anchor. So let's go east to Kharkiv, Ukraine, to Tanya. So Ukraine's clearly really struggled to contain the virus and pushed medical systems really to the brink and beyond. Yet you're starting to emerge from a restrictive lockdown. I understand cafes are opening, outdoor spaces, and people are starting to go outside. What was the lockdown like in Kharkiv, and what are you seeing today?
Thank you, Tamar. Yes, right. Now we have more freedom for people to leave their homes. Cafes and shops open. So many people are in the city now. People are not staying home as much. We have been quarantined for 2 months and it's continuous now, but it's a more free way. It was difficult to get older people to understand why it's important. Everybody reads stories on the internet that the virus is not true. They think that everything is fine and everything will be fine. They said that people also die from other things and did not feel a strong danger because of the corona. Many people listen to this. Sorry. When you will make more programs at your home. We miss them too, but we can do it now. And we do not anything personally.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting to hear, Tanya. And I'll say it's something I've heard also from Russia, that there's a lot of lack of trust in the information that's coming out, and people are struggling to get family members to stay home. So I've heard that before, and that's really a challenge, and it sounds like you're being incredibly responsible. So all over the world, there are unique Jewish journeys and experiences, and I think that's part of what's so fascinating about these calls. In the former Soviet Union, involvement also often doesn't start until people are older and find a connection or even find out they're Jewish. Can you tell us about connecting to Jewish life and why you created Kharkiv?
Yes, of course. I was always knew that I was a Jew growing up. My dad told me a lot about Jewish in our family and about relationships whom I don't know personally, but we were never part of the Jewish community in our city. When my dad died, I was a teenager, and after his death, I became more interested in my roots and Jewish in general. But I did not know what there is a community where I can come and learn about it and meet the same people like me. When I was 24 years old, through mutual friends, I got into the community and stayed here for always, I think. Then I got on the JDC leadership programs on Mitsuda, and after it ended, my life changed. I live to Kharkiv and began to work with a Jewish organization. As someone who came to the Jewish community later, I often didn't know what to do when participating in Judaism and how I need to feel myself in this in program, in the community, with the people. But we create in Moishe House, we create comfortable conditions for people to study and communicate, and that's why they can feel more free, like me in my 24. People don't need to worry about what they know or don't know with us. We are always for people who are already in the community, who feel comfortable, who are looking for something informal communication. And Moishe House is a freedom to study, to do, and to be a Jew as you want. It's very special for me because I feel the same feelings in the past.
Amazing. It's really great to hear. And I know that many people listening have connections to Jewish life in the Ukraine, and many of them also through working with JDC over the years. So I understand you work closely through your professional work with JDC, with the Jewish community. Can you tell us about your work to support Jewish life in Ukraine with JDC?
Yes, of course. I work with the teens, young adults, young families, and volunteer organization. And of course, we work with older people as well. Our organization works with people who can't leave now their homes and they need a variety of help. This program is called HESED, if you know. JDC makes home visits and helps seniors and during quarantine. Employees visit seniors in masks and with protective equipment. Unfortunately, 2 elderly Jews from our community died from the virus during the corona. For all community members, for all age, the JDC provides a space for communication and learning for now. And we are currently working on how best to do this virtually because many people interested to do and to be in community now. One of the part of Moishe House, we also try not to lose contact with the participants in our programs and to continue to work during quarantine in the online format. It's the only format we have now in all community in Kharkiv.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear more about that, but I'll also say it's really great to hear about the JDC work you're doing and just knowing how closely we work with Moishe House and JDC. So thank you for that partnership. So I'd love to hear from Moishe House of Kharkiv. I know you've been planning virtual programming. What have you learned from this time? What works? What doesn't? Is there anything you want to share that you've learned from virtual programming?
Oh, sure. We have a big community Passover event, and we have on this event more than 100 families. And it was very big event with all organization in our city. We have many people for Jewish learning events. I don't know why, but the people now come to these events more than in offline life. Our cooking classes have been successful too. But we hear from people that they lack personal communication. Many of our strongest communities members are struggling with the virtual format. They want to visit our houses, which in many ways is a big part of who is Moishe House. They always told to us, we understand it's a corona, but we want to see you, we want to be in your house. It's really...
Yeah. It's very true. It's very hard to form personal connections virtually. And I think we've probably all seen that, Zoom was at a high and then there's some fatigue. So I think we're all going to be challenged to keep learning and trying new things. So thank you, Tanya, for that and for all that you do for the Jewish community.
Thank you so much.
So let's come back across to America and we'll go to Boston. Simona, welcome back to Global Voices. So a few other community builders are busy planning something unique later up this month. So tell us about the Global Shavuot.
Yeah, so we are really excited to be bringing together houses from all over the world for the Global Shavuot Festival. It basically started when 2 residents, Julia Cinnamon from Moishe House Silicon Valley and Alex Richler from Moishe House Toronto, they were chatting. They'd, I think, really connected at Retreatology, a retreat about retreats last fall. they'd been chatting pretty recently, just like a month and a half ago. And Julia said, basically, you know, I haven't really done things for Shavuot before. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this thing? You know, and Alex went home, and her mind is really great with logistics. So she sat down and basically wrote out a giant spreadsheet with times and time zones that kind of spanned across the entire world. And then the question was, okay, we have the spreadsheet. How do we fill it in? What do we put in there? And they had put a call out for anybody to help with this in the really love global jewelry and logistics. So I put my hand up. We had a quick call and we decided, okay, we just want to fill in these 30 hours worth of programming with basically anything we can imagine, from starting with, you know, Shabbat in San Francisco and going to Australia, going to Shanghai, and then all the way across the world so that we could come back to basically to Chicago, which is essentially where it's ending. And basically over the course of 2 weeks, we got over 20, it's well over 20 now, houses, MH hosts, folks we met at Retreatology, other types of educators kind of associated with Moishe House, to put their hand up and say, yes, this is something I want to participate in. And even for people who, you know, weren't able to participate because their schedules are already full, everybody we talked to was really, really into the idea and contributing their kind of programming. So that's really exciting. And we have folks, you know, in such different communities that I think if Corona hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had a need to reach out to them, and we probably wouldn't have, including, you know, actually Moishe House Shanghai, who is leading a program on, you know, jewelry in China, that I don't know that I would have reached out to if they hadn't been on the very first Global Voices to talk about what it was like, you know, living in China during this shutdown.
It's really a testament to the global connections that are happening more and more right now. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. Sounds super fun. I certainly will try to log in if you'll have me. But for a program like this, I'm curious. We all talk about impact, defining success, measuring success. How do you define success with a program like this?
Every programmer's favorite and least favorite question. So, you know, the core team, there are 4 of us that are really working on it. And we had this conversation about KPIs, key performance indicators, about the numbers, you know, what makes for a good number of people in a program, usually going to be about like 15 to 20 during any one of the blocks. But there are certain programs that do better with fewer people because they're more interactive. And everyone has been on a Zoom call with 20 people where everyone tries to speak at the same time. It's a disaster. And then there are those that are a little bit more lecture-based. And those, if we have 40 to 50 people, I think that would be great. We have one program that actually Stephanie Groner and her sister, Becca Groner, Stephanie is a former resident of my house. They are having a conversation with their grandfather with their 80. And I think that I can easily see, you know, 30, 40 people signing on just to hear that conversation for 30 minutes. So we've definitely talked about that in terms of numbers, but in terms of what we want people to walk away with, there will be people who have never heard of Shavuot before this. And it just sounds fun because there's a session on women and beer and how that's about Shavuot, because those sound interesting. And then there will be people who have spent, you know, the past 10 years studying, you know, text and learning about the holidays and so on, and everything in between. And we really want people to walk away with feeling like this was something, a good use of their time, but also that they're more connected to people all across the globe. We are really unique in this situation, being able to draw from Moishe houses across the world, that you're going to meet people on these Zoom calls you would have absolutely never spoken to. And this is an opportunity for new connections, new friendships, new learning opportunities, and also walking away with the feeling of like, Judaism is really cool because it connects us in all of these different ways. So that's something else that we're really excited about.
Very cool. It's pretty an incredible initiative, Simona. Thank you for sharing. I'm just curious to hear a little about your community in Boston and Cambridge. How's virtual programming going? How are you doing? And any partnerships you want to highlight?
Yeah, definitely. So virtual programming is going okay. I mean, I think a lot of people are getting a little bit of Zoom fatigue. So we're thinking about ways to take a bit of the programming offline. So we did a virtual 5K where, you know, people ran a 5K and then sent us pictures, which was really nice. But we're also keeping things a little bit fun, a little bit light. Next month, we're doing a virtual roast of one of our housemates. So that already has over 100 people interested in participating. So we'll see how that goes. But then we're also partnering with CJP, our local federation, that we're very grateful to for all of their support generally, but definitely in this time for like an art project around Israel. And then we've also been working quite a bit with other houses in the Boston area as well, which isn't something that we necessarily always do. Everybody's got full schedules, but now we're kind of reaching out to each other a little bit more as well.
Very cool to hear about the idea sharing and the global connections. Thank you, Simona. Thank you, everyone. So I want to turn to answering some questions that have come in. So first, we have a question from Alex in Chicago, a JUF, which is their local federation staff and Moishe House community member. Alex asks, 2 new houses, exclamation point, question mark. That's amazing. Where are these homes located? David, I'll turn to you to take this one.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we're excited. And it's actually, so the 2 houses that have signed lease and started programming are in Fort Lauderdale. And actually, we got that question, we messaged over, and they had a fun sort of graphic of welcoming. So I think we're going to pull that up at some point. And they've already resident turnover. And so there's a great new group that has just started up. We also have 3 pods that have been approved. Now, we talked a little bit and got introduced to pods last week. Pods are 2-person Moishe houses. So 2 people doing 3 or more programs every month. And they can often reach communities that we're not able to reach with the house model. So Zurich will be the first pod that will have there. Buffalo, New York, also the first programming we'll bring there, and a pod in Chicago that's serving a community that we can't reach with the houses currently. So we have those approved, and they will go through the house hunt process as well. And I think next week we'll even get to hear from one of these new houses to talk about what is it like trying to move, find a house, and get a program like Moishe House up and running during a global pandemic.
Awesome. And I want to ask you one more question, David, because I heard someone throw out the word retreatology, which may or may not be familiar to people on this calls. What is retreatology, but also just even a bit more broadly, what are all the kind of retreats and gatherings that support residents?
Sure. So when we did our first external evaluation in 2011, one of the findings was that the majority of people living in Moishe House and coming to Moishe House, they didn't actually grow up doing the things they're now leading and participating in. So when it would be something like Shavuot, the vast majority of Moishe House didn't grow up sort of leading festive Shavuot programs in their homes or in their communities. And so the first thing we tried to do was like some webinars, and we realized like the attention span isn't there, and we can't get the depth that we were hoped for. So we then tried and said, well, let's, instead of doing an hour, let's actually do 3 days and do it in person. And all of a sudden we had a wait list. And so we did a learning retreat that was really specific on how to create that. That first one was how to create and build Sukkot in your home. So fast forward, we now do, when we can gather, about 20 in-person learning retreats. And the demand was so good for them around the world that in order to scale it beyond that, we expanded it to peer-led learning retreats. So we we're giving young adults the opportunity to lead, partner with a Jewish educator, a mentor, and create their own learning retreats. And last year we did 110 peer-led learning retreats around the world. And in order to be able to host a peer-led learning retreat, in addition to having a mentor, a Jewish educator who's there, you also go through a training called Retreatology. And we host 3 Retreatology trainings a year to get young adults the ability to create and build these immersive learning experiences.
Thanks, David. That's so helpful, because I think it's just amazing to understand that, you know, Jonas, Tanya, and Simona are 3 of hundreds of residents that not only are gathering people, and sounds like for all of you this is a meaningful community experience, but Moishe House is really investing in all of you to be activators and empower and engage each other. And so it's really incredible to hear how we're doing that through seminars and through retreats. From Roe in San Diego. So being roommates is kind of a new thing in the pandemic era, right? Jonas, how do you communicate about what you need to feel good and safe hosting people at your home, and when that's allowed?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So how will you communicate? So the idea of being roommates, being in a house together, it's, you know, an odd thing in a pandemic. So how do you think you'll communicate so that people will feel good and safe, and you'll feel good about hosting people?
I think it's, you know, we've never been prepared to this situation before. So everything will be, you know, new challenge. Everything is a new challenge, and communication is definitely one of those. People are definitely, you know, a bit worried. Even, I mean, as residents or as community member, you know, you've got this common worry about programming. So we are, you know, getting some. We are trying to get some equipment to, you know, better respect the regulations and so on. So it's a bit tricky, but we will do it for sure.
Great. So Tanya, I'm curious, how do you stay connected to other Russian-speaking Moishe houses around the world? Is that helpful? And what are you hearing from them? Is your experience all very similar, or are you seeing differences?
Yes, I talk with Moishe houses all over the world. I'm happy to do this, and we sometimes work together. I visited some homes, and the guys from other homes also take time in our house. We've partnered with Moishe House Moscow, with Moishe House St. Petersburg, and with Moishe House of Tel Aviv. It's like 2 weeks ago, Russian speaks Moishe House, and they asked me to take over their Instagram. And all day I posted about quarantine in my country and other interesting stories about our city and our community.
That's really interesting and incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Example of global connections that are happening as a result of this. So with that, I want to thank all of you. I would say that, you know, it's not only inspiring to hear from you and generates ideas, but I think it's a real testament to the power of being a global community and the power of Moishe House being able to have an imprint so far and wide. So I want to pass it back to David Siegelman, our trusted founder and CEO, to wrap us up.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Jonas, Tanya, Simona. We just appreciate all that you're doing and creating and building inspiring Jewish homes around the world. And on the RSJ front, I'll also say we do have a group that's been approved as well as a third Moishe House in Toronto, where we also have an RSJ house now. So it'll be the third house there as they start the house hunt. And if you'd like to join, just reminders, this Sunday at noon, we have the grand finale for an hour with Expedition 9. It'll be a lot of fun, and we'll get to crown the victors and see a lot of highlight reels and blooper reels. And the following weekend, we'll have Shavuot, and you can pop in for any pieces of global Shavuot, and you never know who you're going to learn from. An Australian, someone in China, Europe, North America, even South Africa. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for learning. And if you're interested in the link, you can come and go as you please. It'll be for 25 hours. So if you actually log in and stay the entire time, we will worry about you. So it is totally fine to come in and out. And next week we'll also hear from Australia and explore a little bit what is it like to start and create a Moishe house in the midst of a global pandemic. So thank you, everyone. Have a good week. Stay healthy and take care. Bye.
Cool.
Thank you.